Welcome to Aerospace Testing International's Test and Innovation Podcast, episode number 3. I'm Ben Sampson, editor of Aerospace Testing International, and in this episode I interview Dean Moore, flight test specialist at Vertical Aerospace. If you haven't heard about Vertical, it's a startup based in Bristol in the UK that is making good progress developing an eVTOL air taxi that it initially wants to operate in between cities. A lot's been happening at Vertical recently. After finishing the flight testing of its prototypes, it's released the details of its production aircraft, the VA-1X, and also announced a supplier partnership with Honeywell for the avionics. But most importantly this summer, it recruited Dean to head up its flight testing program, which it plans to start next year. I spoke to Dean early September after his bedding in period and shortly after the big design reveal to quiz him about the aircraft and his plans for the testing program. I hope you enjoyed this podcast, and I'll talk to you after the interview. Dean has been with the company for a few months after spending some time, spending his earlier career at Boeing, at Kinetic, then Boeing. Isn't that right, Dean?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I spent most of my time at Kinetic. I go back long enough to be an old civil servant as well.
Okay.
That. So yeah, but most recently Boeing and now at Vertical.
Okay. So, I mean, what kind of test programs were you involved with at Boeing and Kinetic, and how does that? Actually, tell us a little bit first about the project at Vertical. I mean, I gave it I didn't really give it the respect it should have done during my introduction. So, describe it to us, the aircraft and what's going on there at the moment, please.
Yeah, I think the project at Vertical, the VA-1X, which is the aircraft platform that we've just recently sort of publicly announced, is a winged eVTOL platform, which, I think it's the best thing, certainly for us, the best solution for getting a real product out there that's going to give a good return for the customers. So just for everyone, we're looking at a 5-occupant aircraft, so a pilot in the front, 4 passengers, a winged aircraft with 8 rotors when it's in the vertical mode, and it's got tilting rotors, as people will see from the renders and the videos that have been released. So 4 rotors at the front that tilt, so they'll come up vertically when you're in for a vertical landing and takeoff, and then they'll go into the horizontal, and then it will propel you along like a mini Hercules, effectively. Sort of going back to my previous experiences with in-flight testing. So if people sort of imagine that, that's the sort of aircraft that it looks like, and a V-tail at the back, which is quite distinctive. Okay,
great. And you mentioned there your previous experience at Boeing and Kinetic. I mean, how does that? I mean, what were you involved with there, and how does this contrast with the stuff that you were involved with at those companies, please?
Yeah, that's quite interesting. Certainly, with what we're doing is setting up. I've come in as a flight test specialist, so our big thing is Vertical's done a few test programs already with proof of concept and SAREF as well before, that people will have seen. But obviously this is the next big step, and it's just taking another step in our development in setting up the flight test organisation. So interesting enough, that's kind of the work I was doing at Boeing, setting up the flight test organisation, very much around UK military aircraft, so predominantly the Chinook aircraft. So I went in 7 years ago, I think it must have been, into Boeing and helped set up the regulatory approvals and the flight test organisation there to get the Chinook modifications, digital flight control systems, in most recently in a number of safety mods, and also working on C-17s as well. So that's I'm sort of replicating, setting up the test organisation for the 1X program and a whole certification effort we've got in Vertical, which is really exciting. And obviously before that at Kinetic and at the test pilot school teaching, people had to do flight test, a range of different aircraft that over the years. I mentioned the Hercules. It was my first aircraft I worked on all those years ago, over 20 years ago. One of my first jobs was crosswind landings and low-speed stall work with that aircraft. So, all of a sudden, all that experience comes back, because it's exactly the sort of area we're dealing with 1X as well.
So, you joining the company a few months ago, is that a sign of how the program at Vertical's maturing? I mean, it's quite... The development start 3 or 4 years ago, didn't I think, with the SAREF and the 2 prototypes that have been up in the air. But now is it kind of moving up a gear there?
Yeah, they're definitely moving up a gear. It's the next step, 1X, on our journey to a certified platform. So, as you mentioned, Vertical's had a good couple of prototypes previously to help build up the expertise and knowledge within the organisation. So, proof of concept, POC, as it's referred to, and people can have a look at those on the website. Was an initial kind of look a few years ago, and then SARAF was the most recent 8.6 rotor. Trying to remember how many rotors, but SARAF was the most recent flying exercise which was done up at Lamberta, and there's some good videos of the work that was done to help the company develop on its journey into producing an air taxi that can really sort of revolutionise the sort of air mobility kind of piece. And this is a next big step up. So a lot of I'm not just the only one who's just recently come in, sort of bringing in expertise that Tim Williams from Rolls-Royce and Eric Sampson as well from out in Switzerland's come into the company to really make a step change in our journey into producing and getting this aircraft certified.
Okay, so what's the next job on your to-do list then what's the kind of current status and what are you looking at next?
So really setting out how we're going to flight test this fantastic concept that we've just released. So just working out how we're going to approach all the test program, where we're going to do it, and also working alongside the guys. We're obviously the testing is continuing right now as well. So building all the stuff that's been done previously. There are various rigs that we're working through at the moment to just test out various components, parts of the systems that are going to go into 1X. That's all happening at the moment in various places, and so mainly at Bristol, and also looking at pilot in the loop simulation as well. So I've come in and helped out with looking at handling qualities, for instance, around the way we're going to operate the aircraft, how it's going to handle for the pilot, and starting to assess those against the sorts of means of compliance that we will see coming out of EASA.
So a lot of ground testing at the moment then.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Ground testing and testing in bits, or testing parts or bits together before we get into the full up of putting a whole aircraft together. So yeah, there's a lot of work already going on that comes out of all the work from SARAF and in the development work and feeding into the detailed design of 1X.
And you mentioned pilot in the loop there. Could you explain that for me? What do you mean exactly by that?
So really, we're going to be having a pilot who's going to be operating the aircraft. So really, you're starting to look at the control strategy and the displays and how that all comes together, particularly with tilting rotors and providing an aircraft that handles really easily. So, we're trying to get away from having concepts where, helicopters, if anybody's flown helicopters, where you sort of sneeze on one control and then move all the other ones. Yeah. So really trying to provide an augmented flight control system that makes flying the e-taxi really easy for whoever might be operating it.
So does that happen? Is that within a simulator or within a kind of?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got a simulator up and running in Bristol. So we've got the pilot seat, the inceptors. We've been using a lot of virtual reality as well. So obviously in the low speed environment, a lot of flying around with helicopters is manoeuvring around. So if you have just a standard big screen in front of you, sometimes where you want to go is off the screen. So virtual reality allows you to move around. There's some constraints in resolutions and all that kind of stuff, but we're balancing up what's the best way to look at evaluating and handling qualities to get the best out of the simulation and enhancements to that as we go forward as well.
Okay, I guess a lot of the data from the SARAF testing feeds into that simulator and the modelling and stuff, does it? Or it kind of feeds?
Yeah, it feeds into that in some respects. The arrangement for the rotors is very different. So, right. But certainly the knowledge that we gain from SARAF, particularly around, we talked about various kind of challenges that we're coming up with this. All the things that we learned through there. So certainly with structures and the way that the electrical power generation or storage and transfer is done, and how that feeds into the flight control system. A lot of lessons that have been learned from SARAF are feeding back into the design process for 1X as well. So yeah, we're sort of building on the stuff that we've done on SARAF and building that back into the simulations and the rig testing we're doing now to try and help de-risk and deliver an aircraft in about a year's time that we can fly hopefully safely, and prove the concept works.
Yeah. Okay. This is the tricky question, really, I suppose, in a way. What kind of keeps you up at night worrying about it, worrying about the aircraft, and what do you see as the kind of biggest challenge or the biggest risk, really, to do with the program at the moment?
The biggest risk, it's quite an interesting load of different technologies all coming together. I think the thing for me, and certainly from a previous background, I've been used to aviation fueled aircraft. So sure. I'm finding probably the biggest change in mentality for me is very much moving towards the energy and electrical storage and distribution and that sort of element to it. That's quite a challenge. I think everyone talks around the issues on power density and all that kind of stuff. So that's a big thing for us to deliver a product that will actually give a return. I think for us as well, and indeed everybody else, it's having those multiple kind of effectors on the aircraft position and movement as well. So as you picked up there, we've got 8 rotors all pointing up. Yeah. That's a bit different to having 1 or 2 big rotor discs above your head, which you're tilting and changing and all that kind of stuff to maneuver around. So that will be really interesting to see how that works and making sure it does work to give the right level of agility. But also, we're also going to be very mindful. I'm quite used to military helicopters, and you need to have a certain amount of agility, which means you have to move aggressively and precisely. You still need to move very precisely here, but obviously you've got people who are paying customers in the back. They're not troops who are going to run out into a firefight. So you need to be able to deliver them with a nice ride quality. You want them to come back again, having had a good, nice, safe and easy ride from A to B. So you want them to come back and go, that's an aircraft that I want to fly on again. So that's another one for us. There's a different aspect to looking at handling of the aircraft and getting it from A to B.
Yeah, and you're working with Honeywell, aren't you, on the flight controls system?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the big things that helps with us is, particularly as a smaller company, is leveraging the sorts of expertise from a partner like Honeywell, who've got a lot of expertise in flight control, and then teaming that up with the work that we're doing to basically make the aircraft work properly.
So I mean, I guess that helps because you don't feel like you have to solve all of the problems in that case,
I think you were talking to me earlier, I think, about the difference in size of organisations. Having come from Boeing, there's a lot of expertise in an organisation and a lot of sort of vertical integration of various aspects. We don't necessarily have all of that. So, we'll be working with key suppliers like Honeywell on delivering what we are looking to do with 1X. So, it's about understanding what we're good at, and then also bringing in partners who can help us deliver to the vision of delivering a revolutionary e-taxi. Yeah,
I agree. Having following this sector for a while, I think it's companies like Vertical that tend to have the vision sometimes. Most of the time. I mean, it is quite a crowded space, though, isn't it? There's a lot of development going on. There's a few other projects that I would put forward that would kind of compete with you guys in terms of being along the line towards an operational aircraft. I mean the people in Germany, Lilium and Volocopter, and then Bell, and there's a few, Whisk maybe. There's a few going on all around the world. I mean, how? I mean, do you view it as like a race? I mean, obviously not a race. That's probably the wrong way to put it. But as competition, are you within the firm? Have you got this culture of let's do it? Come on, through this test and certification program.
Well, I think there's certainly a keenness to get on with it, which is all fair because obviously we want to be produce these aircraft and making some money. To be honest, we're going to do it the right way and everything. But it's an interesting market. As they said, there's a lot of competitors out there. We've all got a subtly different take on the same kind of principle and idea. Some people are going fully autonomous. I think Whisk are at the moment as well, but perhaps with 2 people. Lilium obviously going with ducted fans. Volocopter obviously going with rotors over the top. So there's potentially different parts of the market that we're all kind of hitting as well, rather than necessarily overlapping in exactly the same space. So I think I said when I was sort of interviewed, I don't know it's necessarily the one about being the first.
Yeah.
We need to make sure we get the product right, which is the important part. There's no Betamax, or there's no VHS recorders anymore, to be honest. But you don't necessarily hear about the guys who were first. The ones that are left standing are the ones who got the product right, and it just got people coming back for more and more. So that's, I think, quite important for us to do as we go forward.
And how is it working with the aviation authorities on a project like this? I mean, because there's so much new technology and innovation going on. I mean, how could you describe that relationship with the UK's Civil Aviation Authority for me?
Yeah, I'm relatively new, but we have been talking to the CAA as we've been developing the concepts that led up to 1X. We'll continue that conversation, because obviously, as a national regulator, we'll be wanting to fly in the UK, and we'll be working with those guys in this up at Aviation House in Gatwick to get an approval to fly 1X and then move forward. But equally, we're also working with the various kind of specialist groups in the EASA in developing the means of compliance for eVTOL as well. So we've got people on various groups, or even chairing groups, to look at developing the regulations to allow us to get an aircraft that's actually certified and a product out there, and a big production line, really, hopefully, in the long run. So, we're sort of engaging as much as we can to push the thinking forward on regulations, and obviously providing all the various bits of feedback to everybody, and keeping a wary eye on what's happening in the States as well. So, I think that's what comes up a lot when we're talking to various people across the community. It's making sure there's been some signs of perhaps EASA and FA not being quite so harmonised in some of their means of compliance and regulations. And clearly, whatever happens, we'd obviously like to make sure that both sets of regulations are as close to each other and harmonised as much as possible, because it makes our life so much easier selling an aircraft globally rather than just, say, maybe in Europe. Absolutely,
yeah. I mean, and do you feel like the development program is quite aggressive in its time scale, or I mean, how would you describe it? I mean, you something back, if you've got flight testing beginning when again next year maybe, and then 2 years after that an operational aircraft. Do you feel confident about that?
I'm quite relaxed about it, actually. Coming to Vertical, in a larger organisation, I think we'd probably move a bit slower. But I think Vertical is an interesting, smaller organisation. I think we're just over 100. I can't remember what number employee I am. But it's a much smaller organisation than my previous employer, Boeing. So, and I think the feeling I've got in the first 3 months of working here makes me fairly confident we're going to definitely do something in the timescales we're talking about, which is really exciting. So it's a little bit of pressure, but it's fun pressure. So I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, we're really kind of working up to really flying next year and putting an aircraft together and hopefully proving a concept I think that looks really good from the videos and the renders that we've put together. And I think it can actually do something really quite significant.
Sure. I mean, the first time that the maiden flight is the payoff, right? Or will be the start. Well, start of the hard work. How would you describe it?
I'd say start of the hard work. Yeah, absolutely. There's quite a lot of guys who have been very focused on the first flight, and I'm not that worried about the first flight. I'm worried about the whole program, because it's important to deliver the whole thing. So whilst it might look great for a photo or a video opportunity to get that first flight, and we'd love to get it done sooner rather than later, I think need to keep the eyes on the prize. The whole thing is to actually prove the concept and demonstrate an overall capability. So I'm keeping very focused on the whole program and making sure that we deliver for the certified program that follows on afterwards very shortly.
Okay. Within the program itself, do you think that there is anything particularly innovative or different that you're doing here that you perhaps wouldn't have done at Boeing or Kinetic? You mentioned pilot in the loop. Is that anything else?
I think we are. I think one thing that always comes up as a problem in flight testing is that time and just turning around data analysis. That's always been a bit of a problem in flight tests, where you're just kind of trying to progress stuff in a timely manner. We are looking at lots of our work is around digital kind of twins and digital clouds services, and I think we'll be looking at using that sort of digital environment to try and help speed up the whole thing, having the aircraft connected effectively to the guys back at HQ so that we can turn around data really quickly. That will be really helpful. We'll use telemetry as part of our test execution just to monitor things and help, because one pilot in the aircraft, you've got a lot to monitor. So we'll be riding alongside them and helping them make the choices they're going to make in the aircraft and directing the flight from the ground. But yeah, that linking up into sort of the digital environment and turning around data really quickly is something we're really looking forward to doing. The rest of it, I think everyone would look at as a fairly traditional flight test program of incremental approaches and all that kind of stuff. We'll take things relatively slowly. We'll look at the risk and make those steps appropriate to the risk we're taking every single time. So a lot of what we'll do, people would recognise from a normal flight test program. I think the interesting part will be the technology that we're putting into the aircraft and proving that. I think that will be the real kind of innovative technology leap that's going on in our flight test program.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a question which is probably a little bit general, but I think the answer is obvious, because you've obviously joined Vertical and believe in the product and this concept in the future. But do you think this urban air mobility concept and the kind of this eVTOL electric hybrid eVTOL trend at the moment that we've got in aircraft development, do you think people will get past the finish line and that it's really going to change how people travel around or in cities and between cities? Or do you think it's a bit overhyped?
I think it could. I think it really could. I mean, that's one of the reasons I did jump from Boeing into Vertical, as you said. I think it's a great company, and it's got a great concept. And we talked about the speed of changing. When I was interviewed for the job, at the beginning of the year, the concept we were looking at was quite different in some respects. So it's quite interesting to see the speed of the turn of the design ideas to refine and hone in on something that will really work. So I think that's really interesting for me, because I think that sort of speed and the ability to sort of change the design is really neat in terms of actually producing something that will be profitable in the longer term. I think the lower end in terms of size probably works for electrical aircraft at the moment. I think once you get into the larger regionals, I think everyone's kind of there's been a lot of talk about it being more hybrid based, maybe hydrogen, those sorts of areas. So I think this is a product that could work. I think we've got a great opportunity to actually deliver it as well, which is really exciting. The Wright brothers, when they first flew their Wright Flyer, their engines weren't up to much, but look what we've come to. So I think once we start getting in there and producing something, that will help push the technology around electric aircraft further, and that will only help mature and push the technology in all of the areas of alternative power plants in the aerospace industry. So I think it's a fantastic opportunity to play a part in pushing new technology that will ultimately potentially lead to lots of push around zero emissions, aviation in the longer term. So this is a really important step on the journey to achieving that. So it's
lots of good, exciting work for flight test engineers, and a move away from that kind of standard fixed wing, tube and wings, thing for commercial aviation. I think, right? I was quite happy doing what I was doing at Boeing, but that whole kind of idea at Vertical of doing something really quite revolutionary. And whilst I've played around with aircraft that hover and go fast in straight lines as well, bringing that all together was quite an exciting opportunity, especially doing it in the UK as well. But there aren't that many programs in the UK that you get the opportunity to do the sorts of work we're going to try and do over the next year in. So it really did just sort of shout out at me when they very kindly offered me the job. It was an opportunity I couldn't really turn down. Great. All right, Dean. Thanks. That's thanks for updating us on the program, on the test flight program, and letting us know your own background and your kind of your thoughts towards that urban air mobility concept. All I can do is wish you luck over the next year, and hopefully I'll be soon. Okay, thanks for listening, and remember, if you want a good look at the aircraft or or indeed of Dean, head over to aerospace-testing-international.com. There's lots of other great aerospace testing content there as well, all for free. I'm sure you'll find something to interest you if you're listening to this podcast. There's some there that I'm sure you'll find interesting. Anyway, also don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you next month. Thanks a lot. Bye bye.